We have with us Mary Ellen Iskenderian from Women's World Banking, who's our keynote address for the day, and who will walk us through a little bit about women and financial independence and inclusion. And with that, I think we'll just call her on stage, and I'm pretty sure everyone will quiet down. So, Mary, here you go.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much, Edna and Amita, for your very kind introduction. I'm really honored to be played on with chimes. Exactly. But no, I'm just so honored to be with such an august audience filled with people who are dedicated to making lasting change in a country we all know and love so well. I was fortunate to live in Delhi as the IFC's regional director for South Asia, and I've never forgotten the warmth and hospitality of the people I met and worked alongside. Unfortunately, I've also never forgotten the 10 pounds I gained as I literally ate my way across the country. I'm so grateful to the organizers for scheduling my remarks immediately before a panel discussion about driving lasting systemic impact through gender equality. Women's World Banking's work, and particularly our work in India, demonstrate that women's access to and control of financial resources is fundamental to sustainable, equitable change. For more than 45 years, Women's World Banking has improved the lives of hundreds of millions of low-income women by providing affordable and convenient payments, a safe place to save, access to credit to build their businesses, and then insurance to protect all they've achieved. We also make sure that a woman has the confidence and capabilities to make smart financial choices for herself, her family, and her business at every stage in her life. As a US-based global NGO, we partner with policymakers, regulators, and financial institutions to design, develop, and implement products and policies that meet women's unique needs. As an investor, though, Women's World Banking advances women in the workplace and as customers by taking direct equity stakes in financial service providers. In 2018, Women's World Banking launched an ambitious 10-year plan with the aim of reaching 100 million women, low-income women, across the global south with a financial product or service that they did not previously have access to. So in order to achieve that kind of scale, we started out by charting the barriers to women's inclusion in the formal financial system in a group of target markets. And we assumed that we'd find really significant differences in those barriers across regions and across cultures. But to our surprise, the barriers were remarkably similar in the various countries and can be grouped into three large buckets or categories. So the first are barriers that directly impact that woman's life. So things like whether she has access to technology or not. And I might point out in India, the gender gap in smartphone ownership is still one of the largest in the world at 16%. And then, of course, digital and financial literacy so that they can use that technology to good effort. Then there are barriers that are created by financial service providers themselves, and even though we have a long list on the slide, the number one biggest barrier is that they don't see low-income women as viable, bankable customers. And then there are barriers that can be addressed through policy and regulation. But this is where it really gets interesting for India, because India has made an extraordinary investment in digital public infrastructure, squarely addressing many of the barriers that we saw in all of those markets, barriers to women's inclusion. The Indian government is the largest social investor in the country, and they have a risk appetite that's appropriate to addressing the market at scale. I've seen estimates that these investments have allowed India to achieve 40 years worth of development progress in less than a decade, and they can serve as a model for countries across the global south who are eager to make similar financial inclusion gains. So just let's take a minute on what I mean by digital public infrastructure. In the case of India, It's the digital identification, the Aadhaar, which was totally game-changing. The Prime Minister's Jan Dhan no-frills bank account that is known as the PMJDY, and I'll be talking a lot about that, as well as affordable insurance and pension products. It's meant access to a universal payment platform, and it is increasingly becoming access to entrepreneurial unsecured credit guarantee schemes for low-income women entrepreneurs. But as revolutionary and truly visionary as these infrastructural innovations are, the government really quite deliberately designed them to be gender agnostic. And so making sure that these game-changing technical advances meet women's needs is the true focus of our work in India, and we've really zeroed in on those first two sets of barriers. It's probably best for me to illustrate this with a concrete example. So as I said, in 2014, the Indian government launched the PMJDY account with the aim of creating bank accounts for every household. The original intention for the accounts were to be directly connected to social benefit payments and affordable financial services like savings accounts, emergency credit lines, and insurance. From 2014 to 2024, India's bank account ownership more than doubled, with over 500 million accounts opened. But in reality, the banks were really slow to do more than just open that no-frills account. They didn't provide the loans, most of them did not provide the insurance. Many people, and this was particularly true of women, had no idea that accounts had been opened in their names and that there was money in them from the social protection payments. So it was really no surprise that the accounts had very high dormancy rates, as high as 55% dormancy for women. So when Bank of Baroda, one of the largest state-owned banks who had 15% market share of these PMJDY accounts, called Women's World Banking in, they wanted our help increasing usage of the accounts and reducing those dormancies. So we conducted a whole range of interviews, both of urban women and women in rural areas who were customers of the bank. And they told us that they definitely wanted to get their savings out from the mattress, and they wanted a safe place to save, but they also wanted to be able to save in the case of an emergency. So in response, we created a product called Jan Dhan Plus. And it works so that if you've committed to save over a period of 5 months, you become eligible for an emergency line of credit of about $120 equivalent. We've now taken that to 2 other state-owned banks, Union Bank and Indian Bank. And so far to date, we've reached over 50 million women with the Jan Dhan Plus account and made substantial increases in account usage with all 3 of the banks. This year, we're going to expand the product even further, taking it to India's 443 regional rural banks that serve 58.1 million women. And we've seen that the Jan Dhan Plus product illustrates quite eloquently that financial resilience is a critical building block for climate resilience. Last year, when devastating floods roared through parts of rural Uttar Pradesh, we saw that it was the families that had the Jan Dhan Plus account and had access to those emergency funds that were the most resilient and suffered less from the loss of livelihood. They were able to keep their kids in school, they maintained levels of nutrition, and then they bounced back faster as well. In fact, data shows that women who use formal savings accounts experience 22% less loss of income in the face of natural disasters than women who are only holding cash. But the product itself wasn't the only critical ingredient in our Jan Dhan Plus secret sauce. Women had also told us that they really struggled to build trust with formal financial providers and banks. So we trained women from those communities, these women's peers, the customers' peers, and made them banking agents, or so-called BC Sakis, for Bank of Baroda. And this was a huge success, not only producing great business results, but very, very high rates of customer satisfaction with both men and women customers. we saw that the women BC Sakis had better sign-up rates for the account. They had better conversion rates from the sign-up to actually opening an account. Accounts that were led by women agents had higher savings balances. If they did take the credit, the emergency credit, they had better repayment rates on those loans. And the women agents were better than men at cross-selling products like insurance and pension products. So we've replicated this agent model with other banks, and as I said, we've created thousands of jobs already. We estimate another 11,000 women agents will come online with the Rural Bank project that I mentioned. And we found some of these women agents to be so entrepreneurial, they're building businesses around their agencies, that we've added basic business skills training to their banking correspondent training. And the women agents also represent one of our biggest policy advocacy wins in India. Based on our experience with the women agents and our accompanying policy recommendations, the Reserve Bank of India increased their target for women in public banking by 2030 from 10% to 30%. So for all of the philanthropists and researchers and investors in the room, these quantifiable measures of success are crucial for accountability. But I have to confess that pride can also be a pretty wonderful, if elusive, outcome of our work. So let me tell you about Ganga. She's a housewife from rural Maharashtra who became a BC Saki for Bank of Baroda in 2019. Today she earns what I think is a fairly whopping $900 to $1,200 a month as a BC Saki, which is, as all of you know, a significant income for her family. But she's also the living embodiment of what can happen when these barriers, and barriers like lack of education, cultural norms, and restricted mobility, come crashing down. In fact, her achievements have not gone unnoticed. Just a few weeks ago, Ganga received the Prime Minister's Certificate of Excellence from the Prime Minister himself for empowering rural women in financial services. And yes, I think she deserves in absentia applause. And after the ceremony, she told us that I hope, just like me, all my BC Saki mates will also achieve tons of success. And I hope I keep doing this work for the rest of my life. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what systemic change looks like. So in closing, I'd like to leave you with some words from two of my greatest sources of inspiration. The first is Ila Bhatt, who I'm sure is no stranger to this audience, founder of the Self-Employed Women's Association, SEWA, and we were fortunate she was the chair of Women's World Banking's Board of Trustees for nearly 20 years. Ila Ben proudly dedicated her life to rectifying economic inequality for women in India and around the world. And she reminded us that poverty will never be removed without the participation of women. But my second inspiration comes from the thousands of women I have been privileged to meet over the years. Women who have welcomed me into their homes and businesses, and who've confided in me their hopes and aspirations for themselves, but always, always for their children. And so with the help of the tech staff in the back, I'm going to introduce you to just a few of them. Listen to what they have to say, and thank you.
બિઝનેસ ની શરૂઆત મેઇન કોરોના ટાઈમથી કોવિડથી કરી જ્યારે મને રિયલાઇઝ થયું કે પૈસાની વેલ્યુ શું છે.
मेरे मुंबई के कस्टमर हैं, उनको कुछ चाहिए, सो कैसे यहाँ पे आके तो पे नहीं कर सकते, तो उसके लिए बहुत ही ज़्यादा यूज़फुल है कि वो जैसे ही पेमेंट करते थे वैसे ही यहाँ से कुरियर निकल जाता है.
मेरे को तो 10-15 मिलेगा तो भी मैं करने वाली हूँ. मेरा ऐसा नहीं है कि मैं छोड़ दूँगी, लेकिन मैं करती तो रहूँगी.
पहले कहता कमाया उतना कमाया ठीक है, जो आया तो ठीक है. अभी कैसे कि नहीं मेरे को दिन का इतना टारगेट इतना तो अर्निंग्स करना.
पैसा होगा तो हम आगे जाएंगे.
Post the COVID-19 pandemic, we are seeing a surge in women's willingness and motivation to start, sustain, and grow small businesses. And this is poised to alter the entrepreneurship landscape in India. But a woman's journey towards becoming an entrepreneur is full of unique challenges, and getting access to affordable financing is one of them. A financial institution would typically measure risks and creditworthiness based on a lot of criteria, but are unable to give credit to women because their business is small, unregistered, and they have neither collateral nor banking history. As a result, we see a $20 billion credit gap in India and a $1.7 trillion credit gap globally. In India, only 2 out of 10 women are registered business owners, and as many as 7 out of 10 women don't get credit or loans that they require to start or run their business. And this is in spite of the fact that women feel a greater responsibility to repay promptly and also have almost 30% higher customer lifetime value than their male counterparts. There is now a business case for financial service providers to develop a women-centered design approach that checks for inherent systemic biases, explores alternative channels and processes, and has features that are relevant for women customers, thereby increasing the number of women customers in their portfolio. Enabling more women businesses to grow and succeed will not only change circumstances of women, but also of their families, communities, and the economy.